Okay, as you can see, I've changed clothes. I'm a lot more comfortable. And we're continuing with part two. This is our weekly fireside chat, our news from the Nefarium. And we're talking about the cosmic war in response to a question from a listener that asked me on the Facebook page earlier this week if I thought the cosmic war was still going on. And in part one, we covered the fact that if we use the model of surviving elites and look at certain activities that I've been trying to outline in Genes, Giants, Monsters, and Men, which I realize isn't out yet, but Babylon's Banksters kind of started that process with the financial activity of two different kinds of ideologies, if you will, or approaches that existed towards finance and physics back in ancient times. So I'm continuing that story in Genes, Giants, Monsters, and Men, and in the book that I'm currently writing. But I think my listener meant something more than just the kind of covert underground guerrilla warfare activity that is implied in that approach. I think what he's really asking is, do I think that, first of all, the perpetrators of the original cosmic war are still there? In other words, are the Anunnaki out there somewhere? Do they still have their hands on fantastic technology? And three, are they still fighting? And if so, who are they fighting? Well, if we approach things that way, let's take the existence of the Anunnaki first. I think you have to hold open the possibility that our genetic cousins, so to speak, might still be around. After all, we've been around for a very long time. And if they had access to advanced technologies, if those technologies carried them to the stars, then they might still be around. And the reason I think that this is an important philosophical point to stress is that while I am known to be rather skeptical concerning UFO activity and the extraterrestrial explanation for a lot of famous cases, let's put it that way, within ufology, I certainly am not and have never been philosophically opposed to the idea of extraterrestrials, or for that matter, if you want to call them ultra-terrestrials, in other words, sorts of interdimensional beings, or even subterrestrials, because there are many traditions in ancient lore, in esoteric lore, in legends, that there is some sort of intelligent subterranean human-like species on this planet. So holding that open as a philosophical possibility, then I would have to say that first of all, then that means that whatever motivations there were for the Anunnaki to have fought this war, those motivations may still be around, and we'll get back to those in a moment. The second thing that I think should be stressed is if you go back and look at the motivations for the cosmic war, at least in the texts that I examine in the book by that name, one of the motivations very clearly is somehow it's a contest over the control or influence or policy toward mankind himself. Now, it's to be noted that in those texts, those policies and that motivation in the war are unclear. But nonetheless, they're there. And that to me would indicate that since we're still around, if we're still around and they're still around, the motivations underlying that war may still be around. In other words, those texts implied that the mere existence of mankind was somehow a threat to the gods. So if that group is still around, and if they know we're still around, we would have to assume, on the nature of the case, that the threat is there, and therefore the potential for conflict is there. Now, that leads to the first question. Do they still have possession of these technologies? Can they still fight these horrendously destructive wars? And then finally, are they? Is there any evidence that there is something going on right now that would indicate that this cosmic war has broken out into open fighting again. Well, I think we have to grant that if humanity has the technologies out in the open that we do, and we can certainly conjecture, and I have been writing a number of little papers in the members only area on the website. I plan to do many more. It's very time consuming. That's the only reason there's not more up there right now. But I'm planning to do more on the existence of technologies and a science that is far in advance of what we know publicly. In fact, I just finished a paper last week on the old chief of the Lockheed Skunk Works and some of the statements he made in respect to that idea. So I think we have to assume that if we have the technologies that we see, we must assume that the technologies that humanity itself possesses off the books, that are hidden out of sight, that are classified, are some 20 to 30 years in advance of what we actually see. And if you consider that fact alone, then those technologies are likely to be very destructive. In fact, it's my opinion that the reason that you see the United States and Russia, and very quietly the two other Western thermonuclear powers, namely France and Great Britain, moving quietly away from the development of more strategic offensive thermonuclear weapons, is precisely because they all now are in possession of technologies that basically render those weapons obsolete and obsolescent, and in other words, a defensive technology that can defend against them. And that same technology can, if scaled up, certainly be used as a strategic offensive technology as well. So looking at humanity's possession of this technology, we would have to assume, by worst case type scenario analysis, that whoever's out there not only has something similar, but probably something in advance of what we have, and that would perceive us as being a threat. So that leads to the final question: has this potential for an ongoing cosmic war, has it erupted again, and is it out in open fighting, so to speak? Now, without going exhaustively into details, I think that there is enough to suggest that this may be the case, because we have seen odd-timed things recently. We have seen the Norway spiral. We have seen the earthquakes in Haiti and Chile. We have seen very strange UFOs appearing over Moscow and Beijing. We have seen a number of things happening in outer space, comets exploding, for really no good reason that science can advance for natural causes, unless you're thinking in terms of collision. As I recall, don't quote me on this, but as I recall, when that comet exploded, the signature didn't exactly match a signature that you would get from a collision with something hidden that was not seen on the camera, but I may be mistaken about that. You have satellites that collided, Russian and American satellites that collided. There's a lot of stuff going on that, at the minimum to me, indicate that there may be some factional infighting that has broken out between earthbound or earthborn factions. Things like comets blowing up millions of miles away may, and I underline and stress the word may, indicate that someone else entered the picture, or there's someone else in play sending messages. So is the cosmic war still going on in that sense? I would have to say maybe. I can't say a definite yes, because there's simply not enough evidence to suggest that, unless one takes into what I said in the first part of this little chat, unless one takes into consideration the mainstream religious traditions of humanity emphasize that this is an ongoing thing. But leaving that apart and just looking at some of the things that have been going on lately, we have to hold open the possibility, but we can't say a definite yes, and I don't think, by the same token, we can say a definite no. So I think we hold open the possibility. If the elites that survived that cosmic war survived here on Earth, which has been my assumption, then we have to assume, by the nature of the case, that they may have survived elsewhere as well. So if they're out there and they're running an underground guerrilla conflict out there somewhere, then that cosmic war is still going on. And in my opinion, I'm hoping eventually to write about this subject in much more detail, which is why I'm a little bit reticent right now to talk about some details. But in my opinion, the details that I've already mentioned tend to suggest that this war may be breaking out again. I don't know, but we'll find out. Anyway, stay tuned, everybody, to quote my friend Richard Hoagland. And my favorite expression, see you on the flip side. And I'm enjoying my comfortable clothes, and I might be back with more chats this weekend if somebody gives me something good to talk about. I like doing these videos. I hope you all are enjoying them too. Anyway, this has been Joseph Farrell with news from the Nefarium, and I am going to say so long and have a good weekend, everybody, and God bless. Bye-bye.